the first job of the marketing is to literally just get your prospect to go from invisible to visible. That's its only job. And it doesn't need to then try and sell them right there and then. It just needs to make them visible. And I think I've always taken that to heart and just try to apply that as even just a first step when I'm working with people. Okay, who are their prospects? Who's their ideal target market? How do we get their prospects to become visible? And that's tend to where I start.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of More Clients, Less Effort. I'm joined today by good friend, fractional CMO, and I'm not sure what CMA stands for, John, and AI systems specialist, John Hubbard. John, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Tim. Pleasure to be here.
Now, mate, when that's AI is this new phrase that is sort of very, very quickly coming into the common vernacular, particularly for those people in marketing. And if you're in marketing or business in some context, you haven't heard AI, you'll need to pay attention real quick, I think. But you didn't just observe from the sidelines, you've literally plunged headfirst into the fray, determined to harness its limitless potential. Now, you've searched high and low for an integrated approach for your clients and you couldn't find a solution anywhere. Not surprising, because it's a really new field. So you've taken matters into your own hands and you've attended countless hours of training sessions, collaborations with the giants, and tested over 250 AI tools. You've distilled all that knowledge down to a bespoke AI to derive marketing systems for your now limited client base, which we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about more. Now, mate, let's go back. You started obviously very different landscape now than it was when you started your first business in 1993. But tell me about that. What was it about business that attracted you into the space in the first place?
Well, interestingly, back in 1993, my business was plastering walls. So that was my first business, but it wasn't a marketing business. It wasn't until 2001 that I got into the marketing space. But I fancied myself as a bit of a marketer back then as a tradesman. I thought I could put together a decent Yellow Pages ad and stuff like that. I got enough work, so it must have been doing something right.
Yeah, I think essentially I recall sitting in a spa down at the sort of SciSac gym at the pool some time ago, and I was sitting in there with a bunch of tradies Friday afternoon because they'd all knocked off, and just got to sort of chatting. And I think they were it's a plasterer and an electrician and a whatever else, a carpenter, and we're just sort of talking, and they're going, I said, I'm in the marketing space, and they've gone, no, wasn't that? I was still doing IT project management. They've gone, I couldn't do project management too above me. I don't really understand what that is. I've gone, mate, you do project management every day, right? You may not realize it. You may not necessarily brand it as that, but you do it every day. And I think as a business owner in any context, whether it be a plasterer, CMO, AI systems specialist, we kind of in the marketing space by default, aren't we?
Yeah, every business is a marketing business.
Do you think you could get away with just a Yellow Pages ad back in the day?
Yeah, definitely you could. It was really a quid pro quo. You pay 10 grand I used to pay 10 grand for a kind of, what would be a quarter of a page or a third of a page. And they would give me business for the year. And that was my marketing problem solved, really. Yeah. So then it just came down to kind of customer journey and client expectations and all of that kind of stuff.
When did you see that start to change?
I think so I went overseas in the mid-90s to the end 90s. And when I came back, I wasn't a tradesman anymore. I'd moved into television production and then came back and got trained up. And then I went into advertising on the production side. But by the time I was into maybe 2002, 2003 into agency land, then even some of the tradesmen that I knew and worked with had website and they were moving across to a more digital form of advertising. But I can't remember when it died completely, Yellow Pages. But yeah, at some point there was a diminishing return. But in those days,
Yellow Pages might say that it is not diminished yet.
Yeah, and I think there's an argument for that. If your demographic is or your target audience, that's the way they get their services, then absolutely that would be a place where you would still advertise. But yeah, I mean, they had it in those days. They were basically the only place, and it made life simple in a way. It was a one-stop shop for many businesses that now have to really think a hell of a lot more about marketing to get business in the door.
Well, so it's so Yellow Pages, newspaper, radio, TV. Why did you make the shift from plastering into TVC advertising?
Yeah, I'd been overseas, so I went traveling, backpacking, basically familiar thing that lots of people do in their 20s. And I worked in London, and a lot of the people that I was knocking around with had been to university. They were coming back to all different kind of careers and so on. And so it opened my eyes a little bit to the possibilities, because you do get, when you grow, I grew up in the outer suburbs of Melbourne in a place called Lilydale, and most of the people that I knew were tradesmen or blue collar workers. So it definitely does limit your horizons and what you think you can do with your life. And so that changed just with the people I was mucking around with overseas. I also got into photography in a big way, and I used to travel around for 3 or 4 months at a time, taking photos, and I've got an interest in ancient history. So that was just bliss for me, touring around these old sites in Turkey and so on and taking photos. And so when I got back, I met this guy on the plane on the way back for one of my trips. And he was into video production. And I knew I wanted to do something in video production, but I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go. And I didn't really see myself as a film guy. Like, I wasn't setting out to be a Fellini or make the next Godfather or something like that. I didn't really see that as something that I'd always been passionate about, but I wanted to do something in that creative space. And he talked about he'd studied corporate video production, or it was in Melbourne at the Radio, Film and Television School. And he told me about that, and it sounded like a really good course. And most of the people came out of that course and got jobs in the networks and Channel 9 and Channel 7 and so on straight out of that school. So I said, oh, that sounds good. So I inquired about that and then did that as an adult student. So I did that I think I was 28 or 29 when I did that. And then that just morphed into an agency came along to the school one day and said, you got anyone that's good at shooting cars? And he said, yeah, actually you should speak like Spy. Yeah, I just done this promo video for this rally centre, and so they saw that. And so about 12 months on from that, I was not even, probably 6 months on for that, I was shooting commercials in the mountains kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I certainly noticed probably the mid-noughties. There was this real shift, and probably even towards the late noughties, there was starting to become this saturation of different marketing channels that really introduced a massive complexity into the kind of whole promotion landscape for businesses. Right? And so while you saw people shifting them, and the Yellow Pages became that sort of conveniently sized book that got stuck under your old CRT monitor to raise it up to the right ergonomic height. Otherwise, this is shit because your neck was killing you. And that sort of changed. And LinkedIn 2003, Facebook 2004, launch in the US, obviously the precursors to that in terms of MySpace and Yahoo and some of the other sort of platforms. Google 2002, 2001 started to introduce these other channels to market that basically meant everyone had to completely rethink about how they attracted clients in them. And it became a lot more cloudy, a lot more complicated. It's out where you wanted to spend it. Even when I was running my social media platform through the noughties and into the early teens, I got to this point where I said, we need to change what it is we're doing away from this reliance on advertising, because your advertising dollar was becoming so fractured across the different channels, right? Yeah. It became almost impossible to say, okay, well, I'm going to get now 1/10 of this because the other 9/10 are being spent on other channels to attract business in. Yeah,
we saw that in the agency world. We saw that transition with the corporates. So we were working with companies like BHP Billiton and Ford and Nike and Oakley and people like that started moving away from TVCs and doing, it was at that stage, it was quite even experimental. So Ford, I remember we did a series of, they called them web modules. I think it was around 2000, what would it have been? Yeah, maybe 2003, 2004 kind of thing. Video quality was still really rubbish, but we would film these essentially features and benefits videos of their car range and then have them so people could watch them on the site. And then they would, oh man, was that even, I think that's before YouTube, is it? So I don't even think, it was basically just web content.
YouTube.
Yeah. And yes, you started to see that trend.
Have you seen it change significantly in that time frame since then? I mean, you've been in the CMO space with different clients since sort of, again, the early noughties, working with clients and saying, okay, I've gone from this production side of things to actually advising people what they should be doing, which is a very similar journey to me. I sold advertising, told people what they should be putting on it to make it effective, and then they've gone, oh, actually, can you start to control the rest of the show? Because we have no clue. Because I do wonder, it comes back to that thing you said earlier on, as a plumber, so as a plasterer, you were still the marketing guy, but it almost seems as if companies even today don't see one of their key roles as being the marketer in their business.
Yeah, I think so. People think there's a correlation between being good at what they do and the service that they deliver and having lots of clients. And unfortunately, the reality is there's no real correlation. You've got to be equally good at the marketing side as you do at the deliverables. But yeah, it was that shift for me was I went from essentially the production side to the creative side, and that took a few years that I went from the director of photography, which is the camera guy, to the editor, and then to a producer. And then what really cemented that shift for me was I quit that agency in 2010 to go doing property investment full time, so flipping houses, buying and selling houses, and renovating, and just using, so I've kind of gone full circle using, because I'd done that on a few of our own houses that we'd bought for ourselves. And so I could use my trade skills, and I'd picked up a few other trade skills along the way, particularly working overseas, and found that I was making more money out of this kind of renovation lark that I was out of the working at it for an agency and working for the boss. So I went and did that full time for a couple of years, and then that led into me meeting a lady who was a property investment coach. Her name was Jane Slake-Smith, and we decided we'd start up a business together. So essentially, she'd just written a book. I'd just done a flip of this house, and I'd filmed the whole thing coming out of the ground, time lapses and all this kind of stuff. So we combined our resources and made an online course called The Ultimate Guide to Renovation. That's when I learned most of the stuff. That was in 2013 about online marketing, because the agency world largely was about just frequency of brand awareness kind of thing.
To saturate, if everyone knows who I am often enough, someone will buy from me somewhere.
Yeah, and they had the budget.
So it speaks budgets though, doesn't it?
Yeah, they've got the budget to do that. They can just, and which is great, because you concentrate on an engaging creative, and it's in a way it's a different discipline, but in a way it's an easier discipline than having to measuring every single, like if you put a headline out there, you instantly know whether it's any good, or if you put a Facebook out there, you instantly know what the ROI of that is. So there's a very direct relationship in terms of ROI. So that's what I had to learn when Jane and I created that business and selling The Ultimate Guide to Renovation as our first course. So that's been the main evolution that I've seen really close up on the marketing front, I would say, the type of marketing that you and I probably do these days. And we started with product launches and webinars, and then kind of worked our way through there. But I guess the one thing that has stayed throughout that process has been events. There's always been events somewhere as part of that process in terms of what we did to get dollars in the door or courses sold, and what I've gone on to do for my clients. That's kind of been the main COVID thread. Yeah,
COVID being the obvious.
Yeah.
Disrupted to a solid event.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Do you think there's something that works kind of universally for all types of business, or are there certain styles of marketing that work in particular industry verticals more so than others?
Yeah, I've niched down in recent years, so I can't talk with great expertise across a whole lot of businesses. But occasionally I get thrown a bone, like a friend of mine has got a caravan hire business, and he kind of I said, no mate, it's not my bag, and he said, come on, I've got no one else to help me, come on. So I agreed to kind of just help him for a month and applied all the same kind of stuff. We did a super, like a Dean Jackson style super signature where they could see I can't remember the offers exactly, but it was, we've got these caravans left over, they're the leftover list kind of thing, click the button to see which ones they are. And so I think a lot of principles apply across businesses, I guess is the short way of saying that. But I think there's definitely differences between businesses where that at a tactical level, they don't apply. But I think at a strategic level, most of the time they do. Like I think it's very hard to go past some of the fundamentals. If you're selling online, that you've got to build a list. You need to build, it's not news to anyone, but the money's in the list. And I think if you're able to build a list of people that are in a direct line to the service that you want, a service that you're selling, and you're talking about problems that ultimately your service solves, then I don't think you can go too wrong with that. And both you and I are fans of Dean Jackson, and I've spent some time with Dean in a couple of different workshops. And he talks about the first job of the marketing is to literally just get your prospect to go from invisible to visible. That's its only job. And it doesn't need to then try and sell them right there and then. It just needs to make them visible. And I think I've always taken that to heart and just tried to apply that as even just a first step when I'm working with people. Okay, who are their prospects? Who's their ideal target market? How do we get their prospects to become visible? And that's tend to where I start.
Well, I would agree with that, and I think it's a mistake that a lot of people make is we sort of get from visible to, do you want to buy my stuff?
Yeah.
Like, I would love to buy your stuff, but it's not for me today. Next week, maybe the week after, maybe in 6 months' time, but it's not today's problem. And I think this is a mistake we need to make when we look at marketing. Marketing is not this. And if you're desperate and sort of behind the 8 ball, it's almost too late to start marketing your business.
Yeah.
Right. You need to be looking at something else. And probably that involves your finance company to enough runway to make it work. But marketing really is one of these things that is a long-term play. You need to start before you started, and you need to run it for longer than you think you need to run it for.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and start with the end in mind. Yeah. So if the sale is kind of step 5, so there's a whole bunch of things we can do before that. But I think going back to the original question around do certain things apply across different businesses? In ours, nearly every business that I've worked in, education-based marketing has worked. I can't think of, I certainly haven't worked with a business where we haven't done education-based marketing, and that would typically be some kind of event. It doesn't really matter whether that's a workshop or a webinar or in-person thing. Most of the time they've been online events for me, but that's typically the way that I've worked, and whether sometimes there'll be a lead magnet that precedes that, or we're going directly to the event, or the events, whether that's to cold traffic or to their list. But ultimately, I think the sales come from the list. That's been my experience. Is the lead magnets and even the front end kind of preview events or webinar type things are great for getting people in the door into the list. But then you need some form of communication mechanism, some form of nurture that. Because we know the majority of them aren't ready to buy now. They're going to buy over 18 months or so. So you need some excuse to keep in contact with them. And then you just need to have visible offers. So when they are ready to go, then, they'll go with you.
It's a bit scary to think that you might have an 18-month sales life cycle. Time to actually get to sale. That's in before you start negotiating contract. So kind of deal, which might be sort of 2, 3, 4, 6 months on top of your lead time. And that's why I struggle, anyone listening to this, to think if you're in the poo right now and you think, oh my God, I'll just turn on some marketing this week and just turn the tap on for a little bit and I'll be all set, right? It does actually take time to really generate good prospects. You will absolutely generate prospects, and there's certainly some strategies that will get you ones that are quicker than some of the others. But unless you're throwing a blanket over the entire market to say, well, everybody, this is what I've got, who needs it right now, you probably find that you don't have the budget to reach everybody, and you need to take a longer-term approach to building a mature and solid marketing infrastructure that ultimately continues to generate long-term.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah.
So if you're doing an event strategy, it's not for a one-off event. An event strategy is something you repeat, and continue to dial in and hone as you go.
Yeah, totally. And you can do, and they're not always webinars either. There's a lot of people really successfully using LinkedIn events just as one platform at the moment, and some of those are audio events. They don't even.
Yeah, they've popped up in the last sort of 12 months to go. And again, we're talking about this saturation. I think the challenge that I see, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, is that most businesses try a lot of different things and not long enough to make any of them work.
Yeah.
How would you respond to that?
It's very true. They're not willing to think about it over a longer time horizon and go, okay, this is a 12-month strategy or an 18-month strategy. So they put a lot of pressure on, let's say, a cold marketing funnel that's running off Facebook ads would be a typical one. They put a lot of pressure on those ads to produce an ROI in a very short amount of time, and they're not really factoring in the point that the way we make buying decisions, the majority of us is typically quite slow. You'll have so Dean, again, just to revert back to Dean Jackson, introduced this concept of if you've got a storefront, for instance, 100 people walk in your front door, 50 of those people are never going to buy your widget. Not your widget, not the other guy's widget, no one's widget. They're just kind of passing through, having a bit of a look. Of that other 50%, there's 15% that are ready to go kind of now or in the next 3 months. But the other 85%, it's going to be over that year and a half kind of thing. And so the trap that most people fall into, to your point, is everyone goes for that 15% and they're looking for that's a saturated place to play. Everyone's fishing in that.
That's your old TVC that sort of came on and said, buy now, this is a fantastic deal today only. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I need to rush out and get it.
Yeah.
Look at the rips in the couch. I need to replace it right now.
It's a hard game to play. It's a lot of pressure to put on your marketing assets, like your ads and your funnels and stuff like that. Whereas if you're breaking it down into smaller jobs, so each bit's just got a little bit of a job that it's got to do, and all you're doing at the first place is getting the right people to show up in your world and get on your list, and then you've got some other mechanism that's keeping in contact with him, like regular events. So people, Simon Bowen, I think he's got a thing where he does a 20-minute teaching each fortnight, I think it is. And that's they don't have to be that complicated. And I know that's worked very well for him over time. And there's lots of variations of other people that have got similar things. So, but I mean, podcast is another example of that as a nurture sequence, essentially, as well as a lead generation system. I would put forward that it's more valuable as a nurture sequence because you're in people's ears. People get to know, like, and trust you over time. They accept that your methodology is the
key one. The key one's over time, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The analogy I use, and I completely agree with everything you just said there in terms of time. I actually think Dean's being slightly generous. I think it's much fewer people. I mean, you've probably got, of the 100 people who kind of came into the store, another 200 people have kind of walked past the store in the first place to find those 15%.
Yeah.
Probably in the market right now. And for those of us, I mean, those are regular listeners of the show will have heard me say this before. It's like getting your kids to clean their bedroom. Whilst it might be your priority, it's not sure it's theirs.
Yeah, I like that. It's very good.
Right? And sometimes you need to nag them a little bit in order to be able to get them to do it. Let's pivot to your business now in terms of where it's at. You've taken a big step back from doing a lot of marketing to start to look at AI in a big way over the last 18 months. And some of the stuff you're doing, I must admit, because we do a sort of fortnightly AI call together, which you have very kindly put together for a couple of peers in the industry as well, and really love what you're doing. Why the pivot away from, say, the CMO work? And I know you've still got a couple of clients in that space to deep diving into AI. What should people be aware of in that decision?
Yeah, I was helping a mutual friend of ours, copywriter, put a course together, I think 3 years ago, and we're using Jasper AI to do that. And I'd been onto that for a couple of months, and I was just exploring what it could do. Now we found out afterwards it was running on ChatGPT 3.5 and with a few overlays over the top of it, some prompting in front of it. But I was even impressed at that stage. I could kind of see, oh man, this is going to get better, and this is going to make a huge difference. And as that kind of progressed, that thought got bigger and bigger, or that presence got bigger and bigger in my mind of where this could potentially go. And when ChatGPT, it was still relatively late when I really went headlong into it. ChatGPT 4 came out, and then I saw the way some of the people were using that, and I thought, no, everything else that I'm doing is not as important as this. And so I just went headlong into it. The reason that I think selfishly that I like it is because I've been in different businesses, either working for other people or running them myself or as a co-director, where I've been in big businesses, small businesses, medium businesses, and even in my own businesses, they've kind of gone, lots of staff, no, we're going to cut it down and I'm going to have this. And I've never really found that Goldilocks point. And I think I'm always searching for that pot at the end of the rainbow where I can have some throughput and have some decent revenue, but I'm not managing too many staff, and it could be essentially the business that I set out to create in the first place. Yeah. And I guess
everyone goes through that, don't they? It's no sweet spot. It's like next week it's going to look different. This week it's looking like sales optimization.
Yeah, that's right. And so I've gone through different models and so on to do that. And so AI kind of represents to me as the best shot at that. Just selfishly, as creating the business that I originally set out to. And it won't mean no staff, but it might be maybe 1 to 3 VAs kind of thing might be the ultimate solution that would work for me. Because I've realized that I can do that other thing of managing a team, and there's parts of that I really like. I like the creative brainstorming and the collective part of that. It's terrific. That's really great and really fulfilling. But it's a responsibility, and it's a drag you're always thinking about. You always got to be ahead of everyone else and getting everything ready and prepared and all of that kind of stuff. So at some stage you go, surely there's an easier way. So that's what led me into it. And then it's been a very slow kind of, I guess, building of skill set. So I knew it would be, because I'm not a great automation guy or anything like that. I'm not overly technical. For some reason, this suits me. I'm a systems person. I like to systemize things, and I like to plan ahead, and I like models and that kind of stuff. I like structure. And this is a great sweet spot for me because it's not too technical that I can't do or I kind of just lose interest in because it's a bit hard. It's I could build the skill set up that I could do it, and essentially I could just systemize as I went kind of thing. And once I built a system, I didn't really need to think about that. I could then move on to the next system. So it suits my personality well, but ultimately I did it just because I'm looking for the El Dorado of more cash, less work kind of thing.
Yeah, everyone's looking for that. How are you using, let's drill into that. How are you using that to support your business? And I know the longer term goal is to actually sort of productize some of your learnings into something that you could sort of take to market and sell to other people. How are you currently using AI to create leverage in your sort of CMO work that you do?
So I do at the moment. I've got 4 clients essentially. I've got one client that takes up the bulk of my time as a fractional CMO, and part of the deal that we struck was that I would come in and be more hands-on in his business. So I was working as more in a consulting CMO role there, and that it gave me a bit of a sandpit to play in where I could test and refine my systems, and then I could go away and use those for my own ends kind of thing. So essentially what I've been doing in that business is all of the things that you need to do he's got an event. He's a education coaching business. So he runs big events each year, a couple of events a year. So they're big A days, mid-ticket and high-ticket program, 15K, 25K. It's a very typical coaching business. So essentially what I've systematically done over a period of the last, it's about 12 months now, is just bit by bit just chipped away at automating the most high-value systems and marketing, starting with marketing systems. So stuff like there's so many now because they've built up. But if I think back where we started, it's stuff like the campaigns, the event campaigns. So how can we do a system whereby when we're talking about the same topics, again, which we always do because there's only so many topics you talk about in a business, that we can have some kind of source document of truth, which I call a topic blueprint, that we can plug in, and then it can do all of these other tasks of it. So it can do sales pages and headlines and emails and social media posts and scripts for videos and stuff like that. So I've just been systematically doing that over time. And so now I guess there's always more systems to build, but I did a bit of a triage at the start of that and go, okay, what's the stuff that takes a lot of time, but it's also got what's the high value stuff as well. So not just the stuff that I don't want to do because it's a pain in the butt, but sometimes you can get someone for $15 an hour to fix that problem. But what's the stuff that's got a high ROI if we can solve that too? So that's the way I've been rolling it out. And I was on a presentation the other day and I was showing a graphic of our event attendance, and it's just been kind of going up like that.
Do you think that's a direct result of having that topic blueprint where you've interviewed and said, okay, what do you talk about? What are your pain points, fears, frustrations, etc.?
It's a major contributor.
Using some of the AI to actually go and extract that, because I know when I talk to clients and say, what are the fears and frustrations and pain points and wants and aspirations and so on of your customer, they'll often go, I don't really know.
Yeah. So that would
this is one of the benefits of AI, is it can actually do some of this research for you in conjunction with your own kind of thoughts about what those things should be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that work that we used to do around that psychographics, fears, pains, desires, and so on, we would do at a much like a company level almost for your target demographic, but we can do that at a product level now or at an offer level. So we can really hone that down and produce that information quite quickly. And it's very, very good information. I think with those, so I use that to create those topic blueprints and so on, or a product blueprint. It's the same thing. It's just a core set of information around the psychographics, around the big promise that we're making about whatever solution we're selling today, the big pain that they've got, the ramifications of the pain if it was to continue on. What's the biggest benefit of our solution? What's unique about our solution? All those kind of core things we set up each time. That is the preliminary foundation material then to run the AI, whatever content. It's mainly content creation that we
Okay, so let's go into this, because I know there's some really cool stuff that you do with using that framework to give context for the AI to kind of reference back to. You're then saying, come up with some topics around these particular things. Now, one thing I found was super interesting in terms of what you're doing was then you're validating those topic ideas against YouTube videos. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah. So the hardest thing that experts, and I think this probably applies to all businesses, is you're too close to your own stuff, right? So you can't separate your stuff out and look through beginner's eyes of how they're approaching the topic you're talking about, because you've got all of this experience and stuff.
And dumb it down, and then dumb it down 17 more times.
Yeah, that's right. And so in terms of topics you talk about, like in that whole nurture component that we're talking about, and it could apply to podcast topics or event topics or whatever it is, it's like, how can you look through beginner's eyes and get rid of that expert's curse? And so I'm always just trying to validate the topics. So one of the things that we do, and we do this a couple of ways, is we might generate a list based. So I'll take you through a couple of different ways to do it just quickly. So if you think of the way that an SEO person might look at a content map for a website, they'll have pillar content and then they'll have sub-pillar content. So AI can do that for you. You can put it in a topic and then you can give it a prompt like, go and find that pillar. And you're an SEO specialist, go and find this pillar of content in the sub. And it'll go and do that. And it'll give you a structured map of what a topic might look like, all of the headings and then the subheadings that sit underneath that. So that's one way of exploring the breadth of a topic. Another way would be from the customer's point of view. So what are the biggest questions that the customer has about this topic? What are the biggest challenges that they have? What are the things that they hate most about it? What are the frustrations and the roadblocks that stop them getting the results? So we can get the AI to go and do all of that work as well. And then what I would do on top of that is I would say, right, let's take those two first lists that we've done, and we've got a bit of a landscape of this particular topic, and let's compare it to a list of what we know works on YouTube, for instance. So we can get a whole list of top performing YouTubes on the subject of, well, you name it, how to overcome anxiety, for instance, if you're in the mindfulness space or something like that. And then we can go and get a whole big list of the highest performing videos on YouTube, and then we can run our initial topic list against that, and then it can give us a short list of what we could talk about.
One of the things I really like about that is actually getting at market validation from a source where our buyer is actually already doing research.
Yeah.
And often when we create marketing sort of topics for webinars or blog posts or whatever, it all comes down to that whole magazine approach, right? We've got them to earn the right for 30 seconds, right? So, the title on the front page of your magazine at the supermarket aisle is just there to grab your attention to go and skim through it for 30 seconds while you wait for the next cashier. Go through and go, I'm going to buy that, and I'm going to kind of spend 3 minutes reading that article, right? And so we have this 3-second, 3:30 rule kind of in play a lot of times. And by taking your topic ideas and doing that one step further and actually doing a little bit of research to say, well, what are people actually looking at, and narrow my list down and maybe look at what are people actually responding to with real life metrics, right? Because if you put a topic up on YouTube and it doesn't get many views and the next one does get lots of views, there's something around that little 33-second grab that says, that's interesting enough for me to look at. Now let's look at what they're talking about. That's the next 30 seconds. If they stay there, great, it's going to get more views. And you're actually testing it in real life context against what people are looking at. Now, you don't have to use AI for that, obviously. You could go and do it.
You could use it manually, yeah.
AI is going to do it a lot quicker than...
And yeah, I really like YouTube for that too, because I think it's a very direct, voting contest. So there are other factors. It's a very simple way of measuring, and it's just fascinating. All of that self-produced content, I think, it's been terrific to watch the quality of that go up over the years. The reason I don't use that solely and not cross-reference against those other things like the psychographic stuff is there is a lot that goes into making those videos popular. There's the topic selection, but there's also the thumbnail. And if you I don't know if you've ever heard Mr. Beast, the biggest YouTuber in the world, be interviewed and break down his system, but it's really interesting. He uses three primary colors in the thumbnail. The headline and the thumbnail is always in the first sentence of the hook as the video starts. Yeah. Same three primary colors are how many fingers? The same three primary colors in the background of the first shot. So he's got this whole science behind doing it. So that you can definitely manipulate, or not. Well, you're manipulating, but you can definitely do a YouTube to a really high level and be honed in just on that thing. So it might not be the best measure by itself of how broadly that topic's got appeal that you're considering or in that area. But yeah, so it's good.
That comes back to some fundamental marketing rules that we can kind of leverage now with more tools, but have existed since time immemorial. That if we don't create congruence between the person coming through the front door of our shack to buy goods, and if we suddenly start talking to them differently from on the outside of the shop, they're going to go, feel uncomfortable, and an uncomfortable person is not going to progress on to the next stage of that buyer journey. And that's so important that we create that congruence in what it is we do, right? So if you're creating content, talk about the same thing that the title of the video is on.
Yeah.
Otherwise people are going, what am I here for? What is this?
Yeah, you can. It can be a whole lot easier than most people make it, really. They spend a lot of time trying to think of very complicated topics when they could just replicate what people actually want to learn about. We can find that out pretty easy. I think there's a thing, particularly in my space with experts, is and it's not it comes from a good place, but they default to what they need rather than what the audience wants. And the two can't be confused. Like at the front end, you've got to sell them what they think they want. It doesn't even matter if it's not right. It's like, even if, because sometimes you'll be talking to an expert and they go, oh yeah, but you can just solve this by doing X, Y, Z. It doesn't matter. We're not in that conversation. It's like, what do they think they want? Let's go out with that. And it's really just a popularity contest. And then you've got the platform to talk about what they need. But if you never track them in the first place, then you can't help.
Are you finished with your AI design?
Well, I'm actually 5 weeks through a beta group on just an event component of that, where we essentially go through that topic selection process, and then once we've chosen our topic, we then create a topic blueprint, which is it's been interesting doing that across multiple niches at the same time. And then we create the event campaign. So all of the emails, the sign-up page, all of the follow-up emails that go after the event to get sale. And a lot of that is just, once we've done that initial stage, it's just automated. So it just creates, this job gets done, and then the next job waits for that to get done, and it all happens in minutes, kind of thing. It all chains together. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm super excited about what it's going to do to my niche as well in the automation space, the systems, because it's one thing to create, it's the system to deliver the content, and then the content that actually wants people to do the thing we got them to do.
Yeah.
So this is sort of parallel that's happening. I'm looking forward to how AI says, create me a thing, and then it'll go and do both parts of that for you.
Yes, which it inevitably will.
Far away.
Yeah. I think that prompt engineering will get less and less relevant over time as it gets smarter.
Yeah.
But I still think it's worth I set out in the first place just to learn the basics, and I was happy to learn slowly. If I just learned how to talk to it properly, then that was a big enough win for me initially. And that's served me pretty well over time. There's plenty of people that have got a hell of a lot more knowledge in terms of using systems, the no-code systems and all of that kind of very sophisticated ways of chaining it all together. But I think I've got a pretty good understanding of what the current level of AI can do, and if I give it this input, what level of quality of output I can get. And I can get a pretty consistent level of output, which I've just learned by learning some of the fundamentals. And primarily that's done now just because I think people might be interested is not so much having a fancy prompt, it's just putting in a lot of examples. The simplest way that you can do it now is just using a lot of before and after examples of what you want to do, which is not much good if you just want to get in and do a job really quickly. But if you're building a system that is a high use system that you're doing a lot of, then if you just do that, follow those simple rules of just before and after, before and after, before and after. Here's my before input. Now make me the after input, which is called multi-shot prompting. You'll get really, really high quality results very, very consistently. And if you've done a triage process that goes before that, where you're choosing really maybe high value tasks within your business, then you can accelerate so much of what you do just using the current tools.
John, we normally finish out the podcast with a bit of a quick fire. My first question is probably on the top of everyone's mind. How is it going to change the workforce?
Yeah.
Are we just going to replace some jobs with now AI engineers instead?
Look, the short term, I think I guess it's becoming a bit of a cliche, but the AI won't take your job. It'll be the guy that knows how to use the AI that will take your job.
Yeah.
I think that's short term, but longer term, I think as they get smarter and smarter, and you look at that exponential curve of how much more intelligent they're going to get, because at the moment they're extraordinary, and they're the dumbest they're ever going to be. So I am a little bit worried, and most people I know that spend a bit of time in this space have probably got that same anxiety in the back of their head, just in terms of, if you've ever been to a country where there's a great divide between the haves and have-nots, it's not that great for the haves either, because they've got to live with razor wire fences and stuff like that. So I do worry about how that will go, because it inevitably is going to take a lot of jobs. And I don't know how we deal with that, or whether we're to the point where we're ready to put solutions forward to deal with that suit both sides of the political divide, because it seems to me that concepts like universal income and stuff like that are going to be a hard sell. But so I hate to be pessimistic, but I think it's the downside. It's got a huge amount of potential downside if it goes wrong and we don't get a handle on it. But it's also got an equally, if not more, upside to it, just with the things that it allows us to do. Well, obviously on an individual business level that we've been talking about today, and really carving out the type of business that you would like to carve out. I think that's much more closer to be true, that whole 4-hour work week promise that a lot of us bought into. I think that's much more likely to be true with AI. But on the downside, we're going to have to manage it, because she's a beast of a thing, and it's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, thanks, Tim Ferriss. I've seen a few posts pop up recently about the sort of first $1 billion business for a sole trader. Do you think that's possible in our lifetime?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, because it's hard to bet against AI. Anything's not possible, because it's growing so exponentially fast that, the things that you thought, if it only do this, and then next week, it can do this,
Yeah.
So, I definitely think that's possible.
Where do you turn when you feel stuck?
I tend to go to, in terms of professionally, like if I'm feeling overwhelmed or something like that, I tend to go to the guys that have got a real fundamental understanding of, let's say it's marketing. So that we mentioned Dean Jackson a couple of times. He doesn't tend to operate at a very tactical level. It tends to be a much more strategic level. And I find solace in that, because I like simplicity. If I can just take it back to first principles, that reduces overwhelm for me. It doesn't work for everyone, but so I go to people like Dean Jackson, and even someone like we mentioned there before, Simon Bowen, who also has a very strategic way of looking at things.
Yeah. What's been your least favourite job to date?
I'm someone who builds the systems, but is not very good at running them. So I'm kind of like, I can't be the tram conductor kind of thing. I've got to be happy to design the network. That's exciting. I'll hang around for building the tracks, but I'm not going to do anything after that kind of thing.
It's definitely not the manager, the entrepreneur.
Yeah. So anything in that regards is and I mean, book work is up the top of the list for that, but admin and book work is my least favourite things to do. So
yeah, up there for a few people, John. Mate, I know you're a keen camper. You try to get away every weekend where you can to a paddock somewhere with you and your tent. But if you won, I'm going to change this number, not from 10 million. If you won $50 million tomorrow, what would you do with it?
I would probably, I guess in terms of the stuff that I would try and use that for, that actually could do some good, that I care about, things like nature. So I would probably be thinking about things like nature reserves and stuff like that. Like if you look at, so I like to get away in nature. I think it's a good reset, and I like camping off the back of a motorbike and out of a car. It doesn't really matter. But if you look at a map of different species, for instance, which you can look up these maps online and look where the koalas are, for instance. And what you'll see, for instance, is when you get to the New South Wales Victorian border, suddenly this population drops off across this artificial line, which is the border between New South Wales and Victoria, and that's not due to the koalas reading the sign on the border. It's due to the policy difference between each state. So things like that I feel passionate about. And I think too, as climate changes, a lot of those animals are in a lot of trouble because their habitats don't connect together. So they're some of the things that I would use that money for, that I feel passionate about. Other than that, in terms of lifestyle, I must admit, up until a couple of years ago too, I started to probably resolve this in my own mind. All I was doing the whole time since getting back from backpacking overseas was working towards going back to backpacking overseas kind of thing, because that was the freedom and so on that you had when you were backpacking in your 20s. It's hard to get back to that level of, I guess, satisfaction or it's not so much the satisfaction, it's more the constant inputs. You're constantly experiencing new stuff, new sounds, new languages, new foods. So it's hard to kind of, once you've seen Paris, it's hard to get them back on the farm. So I think the way that I would tackle that these days, because it's nothing worse than seeing a 50-year-old fat bald backpacker traveling around, is I would probably take up something like sailing in my spare time, and and backpack with a yacht on the back instead of
in context of that.
Yeah.
All right, we'll finish up with this one, mate. What's one thing that has changed in your business or career that you think is not a change for the better?
Well, COVID sucked. So
yes, universally, nothing we got through.
Yeah, I hated that in every way, shape, and form. But yeah, that sucked business-wise. It wasn't. It was. You had tough decisions with staff, clients that didn't pay bills, and all sorts of stuff. So that was a thing. It wasn't a decision, but it was an event that I guess didn't pay well. I've made lots of crappy decisions just in terms of not eating my own dog food. So being very adamant that one solution is going to work instead of going out and testing it, just going and building it, and then falling flat on my face. So I've done that multiple times. I'd like to think I've learned from doing that enough that I wouldn't do it again, but I can't guarantee that. Yeah, so there's been lots of learnings along the way, but yeah, I guess you just hope that you're learning from those mistakes and that you're better for it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, John, thanks so much for sharing those insights today. I can see, certainly AI is one of those tools that we should be starting to look at in our arsenal to indeed be able to sort of win more clients with less effort. Where's the best place to find you online?
You can find me on LinkedIn. So just search John Hubbard LinkedIn. You'll see a big AI in my profile picture there, which has not been attended to for at least a year and a half, as a good cobbler doesn't do his own shoes. And then you can find me at johnkhubbard.com.
Fantastic. John, really appreciate your time today. Thanks for sharing those insights and advice and some of your journey to get to where you are today. Absolutely commendable, mate, and looking forward to seeing some of the things you're playing with in the future.
Thank you, mate. Been a pleasure.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of More Clients, Less Effort. If you've liked it, please like, subscribe, share with someone who might find value from John's story. And we look forward to seeing you on another episode real soon.